This oil painting, titled Avenue of Poplars at Sunset, was created by Vincent van Gogh in Nuenen, the Netherlands, on either November 13 or 14, 1884. The work presents a tranquil rural scene. A gravel road stretches into the distance, flanked by tall poplar trees whose leaves have mostly fallen. The time of day is unmistakable, sunset, evidenced by the low, glowing sun on the horizon and the long shadows cast across the path. A solitary woman, small in scale, walks away from the viewer toward the fading light. Her presence introduces a subtle narrative within an otherwise natural setting. The composition is carefully constructed to draw the viewer's gaze along the avenue, guided by the vertical lines of the trees and the receding perspective of the road, culminating at the warm, luminous point where the sun meets the earth. Today, this painting is preserved at the Kröller-Müller Museum in the Netherlands, where it stands as a significant example of Van Gogh's early exploration of landscape and atmosphere. Turning to the visual details, the poplar trees dominate the scene, their slender trunks rising vertically and framing the avenue. These trees are emblematic of the Dutch countryside and were a recurring motif in Van Gogh's work during his years in Nuenen. Here, their branches are mostly bare, with only a few lingering leaves, a clear indication of late autumn. Van Gogh employs a muted palette, browns, grays, and deep greens, to evoke the somber mood of the season. The left side of the avenue features trees that appear denser and slightly more substantial, while those on the right are more skeletal and sparse. This subtle asymmetry creates a sense of depth and natural variation, avoiding the rigidity of perfect symmetry and lending the scene a realistic, lived-in quality. The sky above transitions from a pale yellow near the horizon, where the sun is setting, to a deeper gray as the eye moves upward. This gradation of color is not only technically adept, but also effective in conveying the atmosphere of dusk, that fleeting moment when daylight gives way to night. The interplay of light and shadow on the gravel road and among the tree trunks further enhances the sense of time and temperature, a chill in the air, the quiet settling over the countryside as evening approaches. The overall effect is contemplative, inviting viewers to pause and consider the passage of time and the cycles of nature. A closer look at the solitary woman walking on the path reveals her as an integral element of the composition. She is rendered in dark tones, her silhouette distinct yet lacking in detailed features. This lack of specificity allows her to represent, in a sense, any rural inhabitant making their way home at the end of the day. Her small size relative to the imposing trees accentuates the vastness of nature and the quiet solitude of the rural landscape. The direction of her movement, away from the viewer and toward the sunset, guides the eye deeper into the painting, reinforcing the perspective lines established by the avenue and the trees. While her clothing is not clearly defined, the figure's posture and placement suggest a sense of purpose and routine, perhaps reflecting the daily rhythms of rural life that so fascinated Van Gogh during this period. The inclusion of this solitary figure also introduces a narrative dimension to the work, however understated. Rather than depicting an anonymous landscape, Van Gogh situates human life within it, subtly suggesting the interconnectedness of people and their environment. The woman's journey along the path at sunset may evoke feelings of solitude, reflection, or transition, but Van Gogh leaves these interpretations open, allowing viewers to bring their own experiences to the scene. To understand the significance of this painting, it is helpful to place it within the context of Van Gogh's early artistic development. In 1884, Van Gogh was living in Nuenen, a small village in the southern Netherlands. This period, from 1883 to 1885, was marked by his intense focus on rural subjects, peasants, fields, and village life. His palette during these years was notably dark and earthy, with browns, ochres, and muted greens predominating. This approach reflected his interest in realism and his admiration for artists like Jean-François Millet, who depicted the dignity and hardship of rural existence. Compared to the vivid, expressive colors of Van Gogh's later works, such as those painted in Arles or Saint Remy, the tones in Avenue of Poplars at Sunset are subdued. This choice was intentional, as Van Gogh sought to capture the somber realities of rural life and the natural world as he observed it. The composition itself demonstrates his growing skill in organizing space and guiding the viewer's attention. The strong verticals of the trees, the receding lines of the avenue, and the strategic placement of the human figure all contribute to a sense of depth and atmosphere. These elements would become hallmarks of his mature style, though later executed with greater color intensity and expressive brushwork. The geographical and historical context of Nuenen is also important. The village was Van Gogh's home for 2 formative years, during which he produced a significant body of work. Surrounded by fields, farms, and woodlands, Van Gogh immersed himself in the rhythms of rural life. The date of this painting, mid-November 1884, places it firmly in late autumn, a time when the landscape is stripped of its summer vitality and prepares for winter. This seasonal transition is evident in the bare trees, the subdued light, and the quiet mood of the scene. Van Gogh was particularly attuned to the changing seasons and often sought to capture their effects on the landscape and the people who lived within it. In this sense, Avenue of Poplars at sunset is not simply a depiction of a place, but an observation of a moment in time, rendered with sensitivity and care. Regarding the painting's provenance and current location, Avenue of Poplars at sunset is held by the Kröller-Müller Museum in Otterlo, the Netherlands. This institution is renowned for its extensive collection of Van Gogh's works, second only to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. The museum's founder, Helene Kröller-Müller, was an early and enthusiastic collector of Van Gogh's art, at a time when his reputation was still developing. While the detailed ownership history of this particular painting, prior to its acquisition by the museum, is not fully documented, its presence in the Kröller-Müller collection underscores its significance within Van Gogh's oeuvre. The museum's stewardship ensures that the painting is preserved and accessible to the public, allowing new generations to engage with Van Gogh's early vision of the Dutch countryside. Turning to questions of symbolism and interpretation, it is worth noting that Van Gogh's landscapes from this period are generally characterized by their commitment to naturalistic observation rather than overt symbolism. Some art historians have speculated that elements such as the solitary figure and the setting sun might suggest themes of transition, solitude, or the passage of time. However, there is no definitive evidence that Van Gogh intended specific symbolic meanings in this work. Instead, experts tend to emphasize his focus on mood, atmosphere, and the honest depiction of everyday life. The painting's strength lies in its evocative portrayal of a quiet moment at dusk, inviting contemplation rather than prescribing a particular message. A closer examination of the visual symbolism reveals how Van Gogh uses compositional elements to enhance the painting's emotional impact. The verticality of the poplars, for example, draws the viewer upward, while the receding perspective of the avenue leads the eye into the distance. The contrast between the dark trees and the glowing horizon heightens the sense of approaching night, while the smallness of the human figure underscores the scale and majesty of the natural world. These choices are not arbitrary. They reflect Van Gogh's careful study of how visual elements can convey mood and guide the viewer's experience. In reflecting on the significance and legacy of Avenue of Poplars at sunset, it becomes clear that this painting occupies an important place in Van Gogh's artistic journey. It exemplifies his early commitment to depicting rural life with honesty and empathy, using composition, color, and atmosphere to evoke a sense of place and time. While it lacks the vibrant palette and bold brushwork of his later masterpieces, it reveals the foundations of his mature style and his enduring fascination with the landscape. The painting invites viewers to share in a moment of quiet reflection, to appreciate the beauty of the ordinary, and to consider the relationship between humanity and nature. Its preservation at the Kröller-Müller Museum ensures that this early contemplative vision remains accessible, offering insight into the formative years of one of art history's most influential figures.